It's General Manager Week at Locked On Predators, and today we're taking a much closer look at what Milwaukee may have to offer next season. Is Yaroslav Askarov ready?
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Wednesday episode with a happy hump day and a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everyday listeners who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us every Monday through Friday. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend just a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio. I am usually joined by my new partner in crime, Emma Lingen. But today we are welcoming back one of our favorite guests to the podcast. Eric Dene is a writer for Penalty Box Radio, and he really is the go-to person when it comes to checking in on the Predators prospects and the future of the Nashville Predators. Today, Eric is joining us to talk about the Milwaukee Admirals season and their impressive comeback series win against the Texas Stars. He's also going to share which players he thinks could get some serious consideration during training camp in the fall. And he's also going to tell us what he thinks about what's next for Yaroslav Askarov. Before Eric joins us, do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Eric, welcome to Locked On Preds. Again, you know you are one of my very favorite people to talk to when it comes to anything baby Preds, prospects, all of that. And this is a really good time to talk about what is going on in Milwaukee. Just wrapped up their first playoff series. They're kicking off, another playoff series against the Grand Rapids Griffins coming up. But overall, when you look at Milwaukee, what do you take away from the regular season from this team?
Yeah. It's interesting. Last season, obviously this team went to the Western Conference Final and fell to Coachella Valley. And I think after that and the offseason that the team had with a ton of turnover and a lot of newer players coming in, expectations were in like a weird place, right? People know what Carl Taylor can achieve. There was certainly a lot of hype around a lot of first-round picks coming in, but still some uncertainty about, what would come of it. And it's funny, I think if you look at the regular season, they were arguably the second or third best team in the league, and it almost doesn't feel that way. It feels like they obviously have made the playoffs. They've won the division by a lot, but it doesn't feel as emphatic as last season. But I think this roster is just as good, and frankly, part of that is because those first round picks I mentioned that have come in and younger guys, I think took a bigger step than a lot of people were expecting, including myself. So.
Yeah. When you look at the roster this season, who are the biggest additions? Just, looking at who came in, who they added, who was the biggest loss when you talk about, there was some turnover?
Yeah. I mean, well, I'm sure that the Admirals probably would have loved a full season of Spencer Stastny, but I think it's very clear at this point that he is ready for the National Hockey League. And then, I just looking at the forward group, they lost a lot of kind of scoring punch. You had someone like Cole Schneider leave, who had been a captain of the squad for a long time. You effectively replaced him with Kyle O'Reilly, who obviously was an Admiral back in the day. You don't necessarily get a whole season of Thomasino or Juuso Parssinen.
Right.
Losing Liam Foudy to injury a few months ago certainly didn't help. I think the biggest additions, though, in terms of forward I think it's got to be undoubtedly Zach Lheureux, for my money, maybe the best forward, front to back this season on the roster. He's been pretty consistent from start to finish, where others may have been a bit streakier. And I've just been so kind of blown away with the rookie season he's had. And on the blue line, the blue line looks very similar to what it did last year. So this is not so much an addition, but I think a player that has taken a step forward, particularly with having to play without his normal partner, and has been really consistent for this team, is Adam Wilsby, who, this club might be losing this summer, but I think he's been a huge piece of this blue line in Milwaukee. And again, didn't get to play with Spencer Stastny all that much this season like he normally would, and he's been really consistent for the group. So.
When you look at was it a 19-game win streak that the Admirals went on? It's interesting that you say that this season didn't feel like last season did, because you had this, amazing 19-game win streak, but that wasn't an easy 19-game win streak for the Admirals. Like, they really had to fight to get those wins. But what was the key when you look at that little stretch in there? What was working to get them those wins?
Yeah. I mean, I think the two biggest things really were, the defense and the goaltending. I think most nights during that stretch, Yaroslav Askarov was really on his game and playing behind a really phenomenal defense. I think the Admirals defense has a ton of offensive talent and can be really stingy defensively, but there has, I think, at times been some inconsistency issues with the group. And during that win streak, they really just locked it down. You had guys like Jake Livingstone playing some of their best hockey. You had, Adam Wilsby, as I mentioned. You had Mark Delgaizo proving he is one of the better two-way defenders in the AHL. And that was really the key. I think this group can score with really any team in the league. And so that was not so much the issue. They were just limiting chances left and right. And you only have to chip in a couple goals then to get a win on the other end. So.
Yeah. So they just wrapped up their series against the Texas Stars. Texas Stars have a lot of offensive talent. They've got some really great players. Maverick Bourque, excellent player in the AHL. They started the series down 2-0, came back to win the last 3 to get the series win. What went wrong, or what was the struggle in those first 2 games, Eric? And then what did they do that turned the results around? Because this was a tough series. Like, these were some hard games.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is a really tough opponent. And then you add, the AHL scoring leader in Maverick Bourque to the roster, and, kind of thank God that they didn't send Logan Stakova down, because that might have been a different outcome. I think it's not so much what went wrong in the first 2 games. I think that after game 2, the series could have very easily and maybe should have been 1-1 or even 2-0 Milwaukee. I think in both of the first 2 contests, Milwaukee got off to a really great start. It was kind of in their middle periods in the third where they just got sloppier with the puck, a lot of turnovers, and frankly, Texas capitalized on where they needed to. They didn't have an overwhelming amount of high danger chances. I think there were a few goals there that Askarov probably shouldn't have let by, but overall, I think 2 of those two games, especially game 2, very easily could have been Milwaukee wins if a puck bounced differently. And then, I mean, I think I can't really speak to the value that kind of switching goalies brings. That's kind of in the psychology of the locker room, but that's an interesting discussion heading into game 3. But really what I saw in the final 3 games was just a complete, I mean, the power play turned around, the penalty kill was largely positive, and at even strength, they really just were relentless. It wasn't a matter of, a good 20 minutes and then just starting to get a little bit sluggish. They kept on pucks. They were winning more one-on-one battles. I think they took stock of just how smart Texas's offensive group is and how efficient they are at kind of winning possession, and we're able to combat that. And I by the last 2 contests especially, it just felt like a complete reversal of the series. Texas didn't really look anywhere near like they were able to compete. So.
Yeah. When you look ahead, they're going to be playing Grand Rapids Griffins. That's going to be what they're kicking off tonight, Wednesday night. What's the biggest challenge here? And is there a player that you feel like, this is somebody who's really going to be important in this series?
Yeah, I think Grand Rapids is an interesting team insofar as they're, I think, a bit heavier than Texas. They've got some interesting firepower on the roster as well. But whereas Texas is kind of quick off the rush and can pounce quickly on those kind of like one-on-one battles, I think Grand Rapids relies a bit more on kind of pushing you around a bit. And, frankly, Milwaukee can certainly respond that way, hopefully without pushing any boundaries, at Zach Lheureux. But, there's a lot of great young talent on Grand Rapids roster as well. They've got a couple guys, Jonathan Berggren, Carter Mazer, Tara Hirose, where I think were their three leading scorers this season, and some veterans down the line of too. Zach Aston Reese is a name folks will probably know. Austin Zarnik's a guy that's been around forever. Former Admiral Matt Luff as well. So a lot of guys to kind of keep your eye on. But I think these two teams match up well. For me, it's just going to be a difference of, getting those timely goals. Milwaukee really needs their power play to continue producing. I think you need a guy, it's been great seeing guys like Lheureux and Svechkov, step up and score. I think getting a guy like Wade Allison back in the lineup could be very helpful for Milwaukee. Remains to be seen if that'll be happening, but will put them over the edge, I think, is, getting that, at this point, secondary scoring in guys like Igor Afanasyev, Joachim Kemmel, and even guys like, Reed Schaefer and Jasper Weatherby to get involved a little more.
Coming up, we'll continue our conversation with Eric about the Admirals and what the future may hold for some specific players on that Milwaukee roster. Before we get back to all of that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. We love talking about hockey here, but we want to take a minute to talk about something a little bit more serious, and that's life insurance. Life insurance is an important safety net for your family, but trying to find the right policy on your own can be time-consuming and overwhelming. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace, there to help you navigate the world of life insurance. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 a year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. You can easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Policy Genius's experts give you unbiased advice. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Coming up later this week, of course, Emma will be back here at Locked On Predators, and she and I are going to take a deeper dive into the goaltending debate. What would we do if we were the general manager when it comes to the very big decisions in net? We're going to head back to our conversation with Eric today and talk about some of the players who may get an extra long look from the Nashville Predators at training camp. All right, let's dive in and talk about the Russian goaltending elephant in the room. This is the conversation going on here in Nashville, and Yaroslav Askarov is not done in Milwaukee by any stretch of the imagination. He, of course, did not play the last 3 games in the series against the Texas Stars. You had a really interesting poll on Twitter. You asked who should start game 1 against the Griffins. What were the results of the poll? And then tell me what your opinion is. Who should get the start in this series?
Yeah, so poll was super close. I think by a very slim margin. And this, I think it had like over 600 votes, but I think by a very slim margin, Askarov getting the start in game 1 won out, which I have to say I'm a little shocked by, but I agree with. In the series against Texas, I understand the decision to go with Grosnick in game 3. Maybe don't agree with it, but I understand it. And then at that point, you just got to keep going with him until the series is over. Right? I totally get that. But Right now is a fresh start. And a lot of the comments on the poll were saying, oh, you got to ride the hot hand. Like Askarov will get his time, blah, blah, blah. But I think what's critical here is like this team is obviously trying to win. But this isn't really a matter of like who gives you the best chance to win, because I don't think that, if in terms of like pure talent, I think Yaroslav Askarov is a better goalie. It's just a matter of getting this confidence back. And so what happens if all of a sudden you're in the Western Conference final or the Calder Cup final and Grosnick gets hurt or Grosnick has a bad game and a cold Askarov needs to go in? Obviously he's got to be prepared for that. But I think the point is like you're still trying to develop this guy. And whether you want him in Nashville next season or not is frankly beside the point. Getting as much playoff experience is important. And especially in game one of the new series is your like lowest risk to, if he has a bad game again, great, go back to Grosnick. If he doesn't, great. You've bought yourself some more playing time. You've gotten your prize prospect back in the lineup and you've got some momentum, going through the rest of the series. So, I understand the whole like riding the hot hand thing, but ultimately like this is a guy that you're hoping can play 10, 15 years in Nashville. You need to give him the opportunity to rebound from those bad games. And frankly, do I think he had the best games of his career in 1 and 2 against Texas? No. Have I seen far worse games from him this season? Absolutely. And to bench him for the rest of the playoffs, I just don't think really does you any good. And then you come to the idea of, well, this is clear that he shouldn't be in Nashville next year, which I don't really think that is what that means at all, frankly. If you waited to bring up every player until they had the most perfect postseason in the world, you guys would be in the AHL for a long time. And so is this a learning opportunity? Absolutely. Do I think that he needs to get on the ice again to show that he can, rebound and perform in these instances? For sure. And I think game one in a new series is the perfect place to do that. So
I love what you're saying too about how valuable it is to get him this playoff experience. Everybody is jumping to the conversation of what's next for him. What's next for him? Where's he going to be next season? Is he going to be in Nashville? Is he going to be in Milwaukee? And it's like, there is something very important happening for him in Milwaukee. This playoff experience is going to be huge for him. So when we talk about Yaroslav Askarov, obviously, I'm going to completely now contradict everything I just said 10 seconds ago and ask you the question. So is Askarov ready to jump into the NHL? And if so, in what capacity do you see a path that leads him to the most long-term success?
Yeah. I mean, look, I am a big believer that you don't truly know if a guy is ready to play in the NHL until he plays in the NHL. Word. You can sit there all day and say he's dominant in the AHL, he does this. We're starting to see a lot of people say, oh, Zachary LHeureux is ready to play in the NHL, which I think he's had an amazing season. I would pump the brakes on that a little bit. And so the fact of the matter is like, you got to give it a shot, right? And I think my argument isn't so much about whether Yaroslav Askarov is ready to play in the NHL, because I think he's ready to at least be a backup, play 30, 40 games, something like that. But is like, what is your future with UC Saros, right? And so the three outcomes here, right, are you trade UC Saros this summer and you get a massive haul of assets in return, including potentially a game-changing forward prospect or first-round picks or whatever, right? Or you don't trade him this summer, you don't re-sign him, and you let him walk for nothing next summer, right? Which horrible waste of an asset there. Or you sign him to a long-term extension, and then all of a sudden your platoon, either this next season or the season after, is him and Askarov. But then the question becomes, okay, how many years is Askarov going to be playing as a backup? Is he going to be 26, 27, and he's still going to be backing up Saros? People say, well, you only signed Saros to like a 2 or 3 year extension. But why on earth would UC Saros only want a 2 or 3 year extension when it's his last big contract probably in the league, right? So frankly, like, the perfect scenario here might be that like you trade Saros and you split starts between Lankin and Askarov next season, right? Right. And I think that's a great kind of showcase to figure out whether he's ready or not. And I get it. Like UC Saros is amazing, but at a certain point, you got to make a decision here because you don't want Askarov spending, his prime years still playing as a backup in the NHL, basically.
This is such a hard conversation because you pull one thread on the goaltending conversation, but it links to there's so many repercussions for everybody involved. It's not, it's not an easy thing. When you look at Yaroslav Askarov's game, which by the way, causes me severe gastrointestinal distress at times, not going to lie, he stresses me out. I adore him, but he is stressful to me. How much refining of his style of play do you think he will have to do in the NHL? Or do you just feel like, look, this is just a kind of a new iteration of what successful goaltending in the NHL could look like?
Yeah, I think there's this desire to kind of like quiet his game, which I think has its merits and its demerits, I guess. I think part of it comes from the fact that he is just kind of like a flashy person in general on the ice. And to people who are watching that happen, it feels wrong, right? Particularly when you watch like UC Saros is a very kind of like cool and collected person. And you think, well, you should be that, right? Not what he is. I think that's like a fine thing to think, but I'm not sure that gets at like the heart of actual goaltending as opposed to just his like demeanor. And then in terms of like the on ice product, I mean, I think it's just, again, it's a matter of like getting those repetitions, right? Like I think some of the biggest criticism you see about him from some folks in Milwaukee is that, when he's off his game, when he lets in one or two bad goals, he kind of unravels for the rest of the night. And every goalie that's ever played in the NHL has done that, right? And is that to say that like that is, a successful model? No, you certainly got to mitigate that moving forward, right? And be able to, kind of collect yourself and go from there. But there's no technical aspects of his game, I think, that are like majorly deficient as he heads to a potential NHL career here. Again, I think it's just a matter of like getting more experience against bigger and stronger and faster skaters and shots, and understanding that, at the NHL level, things just go like a little bit faster. And, he's got the speed and the skill and the technique to respond to that. But again, you're not really going to be able to prove that until you get him in there. So
that's so tricky too. You have to grow a little bit in the NHL, but the NHL is also not a development league. So it's like, it seems like you just got to find that sweet spot, I think.
Yeah. But like, I mean, when you're at this point as a franchise, like now is as good a time as ever to be trying that, right? Like you don't want to be doing that when you're trying to compete for a Stanley Cup. You want to be doing that when you're retooling or rebuilding or whatever they're calling it, and, go from there.
We're going to wrap up our conversation with Eric in just a few minutes. But before we do that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home that big win of your own. Right now, new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. As the Stanley Cup finals draw closer, you can still get in on the action with FanDuel. So check out all the spreads and props they have available to you. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So let's talk about a player you mentioned earlier, somebody that's getting a ton of buzz here in Nashville. I think this is another player who he is as a person, I think endears him to the fan base as well. And that's Zachary Lheureux. This was his first season in the AHL. This is another one of the first round picks that they've got in Milwaukee right now. 66 games in the regular season, 19 goals, 48 points, was second in goals and points for the Admirals this season. He has been absolutely ridiculous in the playoffs. 5 games, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. My favorite stat, and I know it's going to change, but let's just talk about his 71.4% shooting percentage. Okay, Zachary Lheureux. Have loved watching him. And of course, his performance in the postseason has a lot of people talking about is Zachary Lheureux ready to be moved up to the NHL? But this was his first pro year. So when you watch Zachary Lheureux, and you've seen him over the course of the regular season and in the playoffs, what do you take away from his growth this season, and where do you see him headed?
Yeah. No, I mean, I will be the first to admit that last year I did not see this adjustment to the AHL coming. I think Lheureux was always a really excellent junior player. At the same time, like always kind of left a little bit to be desired. Like every handful of games, he would be truly dominant. And then every game in between, he'd be good, but you knew he could be better. And that's always tricky because, coming from a league like the QMJHL, which is historically kind of the lesser the least translatable league of the three junior leagues to NHL production. You kind of have to like take a grain of salt with that. You take a guy like Anthony Richard, who scored a ridiculous pace in the QMJHL and is never really made it to the NHL, right? And that's obviously for other reasons. But one thing that I think I was concerned about last season is it just felt like there was a little too much coasting at times in terms of like puck pursuit, in terms of driving the net with possession, in terms of, winning those one-on-one battles. I think we're all old enough to remember, when he was drafted, he said, "You want me on your team because I will go into the corner and win every one-on-one battle." And I have watched probably more games of his junior career than nearly anyone else. And I can tell you that is very much not the case. But that has changed this year. And I have been really impressed with how he has doubled down on his skating mechanics, how he's doubled down on his anticipation of plays. He's winning puck races. He's not like always ever been the fastest guy, but he's winning puck races. He is using his physicality in like a smart and effective way in those puck races. He's scoring off the rush. He's scoring around the net. He's setting up plays. I mean, he's really like diversified his offensive talent. So I think he has fit very well, in this first year. That being said, am I ready to kind of graduate him to the NHL? There's no need, right? He, at the very least, would be playing maybe your 11th or 12th forward next season. Nashville already has 10 forwards under contract for next year. It doesn't include Parson or Thomasino. And for what? After one good season as an AHL rookie, you send him back, you let him truly dominate. And then, best case scenario, 2025, 26, he's called up and he's already, a middle six kind of scoring option for Nashville. So,
yeah. And I think people have to remember too, because we've heard so much about Zachary Lheureux in his career in juniors, he's still really young. Like I think he turns 21 I think today or tomorrow. Like he's just a little sprout. Like he's not size wise, but he's still pretty young. But I know people are really wanting to get a good look at him in training camp. Two other players I want to ask you about specifically, Joachim Kemell and Fedor Svechkov. When you look at these two players, what have you seen from them and where are they in their development process?
Yeah. Well, Svechkov is another guy that I think kind of, bested my expectations for this season. As I wrote about a lot heading into this year, we kind of saw two different versions of him in Russia last year. And I was very curious about which one we were going to get. And, those leagues over in Russia, again, aren't like amazing to be able to kind of scout and chart a development path from. But I think he's really shown some amazing flashes of brilliance. He, at times this year, has been Milwaukee's best forward. He isn't the physical presence that Zach Lheureux is, but he has not really gotten pushed around like I thought he would. He has always been known for his kind of defensive prowess, and that remains to be true. But I think I've just seen a lot more confidence in his transition ability and his playmaking ability up the ice that we frankly just didn't get all the time over in Russia. So a big fan of his, another guy who, another year or two in Milwaukee will certainly help. And then Kemell is, an interesting case because I think there has been a lot of consternation about him this season. He scored the same amount of goals as Svechkov and like a few less than Lheureux, but you would, based on some way some people are reacting, you would think he didn't score a goal all season. And I think part of that is like expectation. He came in at the end of the year last year and was really impressive for Milwaukee. First round pick. always kind of highlighted as a scorer, so people expected a lot more. When I talked to Carl Taylor at the beginning of this year about him, the thing he said was, what I really want to see from him is he needs to be able to play knowing that every night the other team has circled his number on the roster sheet, right? That they're going to be chasing him down. They're going to be hooking him. They're going to be trying to, knock him off the puck, all this stuff. And I think this year you saw the good and the bad of that. There were some games where he clearly, wasn't responding to that well. And I think there were other games where he was. And, at the end of the day, this guy is still the same age as Zach Lheureux and Fedor, right? It's not like this is a 24-year-old first-round pick who's like kind of on his last shot here, right? This is his first full season in North America, and I think it's really only up from here. So, I think there was once upon a time a thought that he could be on Nashville's roster next season. I don't think that's by any means impossible, but another year in Milwaukee will certainly help him as well.
So talking about players who have spent some time in Milwaukee and in Nashville, talk to me a little bit about Phil Thomasino and Juuso Parssinen. Very high expectations under this retool, reset, whatever, youth movement that was going to happen last season in Nashville. Both of them ended up in Milwaukee. How did the season go when they got in Milwaukee? Do you see them getting out of their minutes in Milwaukee what it sounds like Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette want from them?
Yeah. I mean, I think Parsonen's been great the whole time he's been down here. And, again, it's different expectations, right? You're not really counting on Juuso Parssinen to be a top line forward. You're counting on him to be kind of like a third line, maybe like a Colton Assistance guy one day, right? But he's second in the league in points per game in the playoffs. And I think he's just been really solid playing in all situations. Power play, penalty kill, even strength. Been setting up a lot of plays rather than scoring. But, a guy that was called up at a young age, and there's really no harm in kind of getting a more AHL experience. So he's also a guy who, I've talked to a lot of people around him, both here and in Finland. And every single person kind of leaves you with the impression that he is, just a total dog on a bone when it comes to getting better. So fewer concerns about him. Yeah. Thomasino, I think, has also been really good. 3 goals in the Texas series in 5 games, which was second only to Zach Lheureux. So, a lot of people kind of heard that clip of Brunette and Trotz in their comments, and some folks kind of saw it as a eulogy, and I saw it more of a challenge. I think his roster spot next year is anywhere close to guaranteed? Absolutely not. But, you just frankly don't, in my kind of school of management, you don't give up on a first round pick from just a handful of years ago. So this guy is, he's still 22, 23, right? There's still plenty of hockey ahead of him. And, I think you got to give him one more shot. And even if, that's all right, you start next year in Milwaukee, but you're going to earn your way up like Parssinen did last season, that's fine. I still think there's a really good player there. You look at a guy watching the NHL playoffs right now, like Seth Jarvis, who's drafted right around the same time, and they're similar players in certain respects. And you challenge Thomasino and say, hey, this is what we think you can become. I think the moment is there. He's just got to continue kind of putting the foot pedal to the metal here and keep going. So.
Want to ask you about one other first round pick that's not in Milwaukee, but curious your take on Matthew Wood. He entered the transfer portal. He's leaving UConn, headed to University of Minnesota. What do you think about that move, and what do you hope to kind of see from him in this next season?
Yeah, I think some folks have this idea that like in college hockey, at least when players hit the transfer portal, it's kind of like their decision and their decision only, and it certainly is their decision. But this move most definitely had Nashville's hands all over it. I think if you are looking at the 2 conferences in college hockey that prepare you best for the NHL, it's Hockey East, which is where he was, and the Big Ten, which is where he's going. But frankly, if you're not playing at BU or BC or even Northeastern or some other programs in Hockey East, you're not getting a ton out of it. I think UConn, for a moment there, looked like they were building up to something really big. And frankly, last year was a huge step back for them. Right. And I watched a lot of UConn games, and there is, it was tough at that point. So Minnesota is a great opportunity for him. He is going to be playing first line minutes with, legit NHL prospects, going to be playing on the power play, going to be working with some of the best coaches in college hockey, going to be getting an opportunity to prove to Nashville that he only needs one more season of college hockey before he can turn pro. So I like the move. I think it indicates nothing but success, hopefully, for him, and we'll see how he takes the challenge.
All right. Milwaukee Admirals are going to kick off their series against the Grand Rapids Griffins. Woo! Tonight, 7:00 Central Time. That's on AHL TV. You can listen to it. Also on the Big 920, they will carry the audio of it. Eric, in the meantime, where can everybody find all of your work?
Yeah, you can find my written work on penaltyboxradio.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at OnTheFuturePBR.
I want to thank Eric for joining us here at Locked On Predators. We always love having him on and hearing his thoughts on the Milwaukee Admirals, all of the Predators prospects, and what may be next for the Nashville Predators. Be sure to join us again tomorrow. Emma will be back, and she and I are going to dive into the goaltending debate. With Eric's thoughts from today, we're going to speculate on what the best path forward in net is for the Nashville Predators. So be sure to come back and tune in for that. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with that all new episode. We'll see you then.